Hey everybody, Corey McCullough, author here. So this is another session of my live writing work. It's not actually writing. I'm going to be reviewing the audiobook that was just recently completed for me for my novel Rust on the Allegheny. The last time I did one of these videos, I used my whole live stream setup to just to record my work session and put it out there and just see if it's something that anybody was interested in. And I actually got some response to it. Some people watched it, and I put the question out there, hey, is this interesting enough that I should, do this every once in a while? Would it be interesting to kind of put this out there and have people watch it and kind of just be like able to look over my shoulder while I'm doing some of this work? And I got a little bit of a positive response to it, not a lot, but I thought I'm doing the same thing today. I got a little bit of time while my son is sleeping. He's taking his nap right now, and I'm going to be going and getting my girls from school in just a little bit here. So I got a little bit of time. I'm going to review a chapter or two of Rust on the Allegheny. Same thing I did yesterday. What I'm going to be doing is listening to the audio files that have been submitted to me by the narrator, and I'm going to be following along with the book, the actual PDF of the paperback. And what we're doing is basically proofing the narrator's work, because if there's any sort of mistakes in there, I've got to catch them before this gets approved and put out there as the audiobook. And so this is going to be on Audible. I think this one I'll be able to put on Spotify, and possibly I might be uploading it to YouTube also, just for free. So without further ado, I'm going to switch over to the writing screen. My computer has been acting up, so when I switch over, I'm probably going to have to refresh the camera. Yeah, I'm frozen. So just 1 second while I fix that. All right, it's working now. So up here we can see we're moving into part 3 of the audiobook. Each of the parts of this book, I split it up into 5 parts, and each of the part names is sort of like arranged around a jazz theme. So this puts us into chapter 16, and this book is told through a shifting perspective that jumps back and forth in time between the modern day with a main character who's, just this young man who has he's starting a family, he's got a wife and a daughter, but then it jumps back in perspective to his grandfather as a 10-year-old in the 1930s, and we see that he's got his own story. And then this recent part is the first time we get the perspective of the generation between. So the main character's father in the 1980s, I think he's 19 in this, but he's a college freshman who is on his way home for Thanksgiving break. And so this is his story now that we're seeing. I hope this isn't going to be too loud.
Chapter 16. Lou shifted the Blazer into gear and hit the gas. By the time he was back into third, the rain was coming down pretty hard. He grabbed a Marlboro from the pack in the cup holder and pulled the lighter out of its socket on the console. He held the orange hot coil to the end of the cigarette and took a drag. When he offered the pack and the lighter to the girl, she accepted them wordlessly and lit up. Then, as an afterthought, Lou asked, "How old are you?" 18, she said. "Okay," said Lou. A moment of silence. 16, she said. "Okay," said Lou. "There's a coat in the back seat if you want it." The girl found it and pulled it over herself like a blanket. There were a few more moments of silence as Lou navigated the wooded twists of 322, the rain sounding like a marching band against the roof of the vehicle. "So," said Lou, "probably none of my business, but I'm going to ask anyway. Are you sure I should be taking you to Twin Oaks Road? Not a hospital?"
If you didn't catch last time, this girl is a hitchhiker who Lou picked up off the side of the road in the cold. She's looks like she's been beaten up. She's got some dry blood on her head. And so he was going to pass her by and then looked in the rearview mirror, saw that it looked like a young girl, and so he backed up and she got in. And just for a little bit of perspective on this story, this is a fictional place that it takes that the story takes place in, but it's very closely based on real life places. Some of the places are actually real. So we're talking about Route 322. There is a Route 322. There's a real life parallel to that. But this is a fictional Route 322 that's traveling between two fictional towns.
I think I'm okay, she said. Taking another puff of the cigarette, she checked the vanity mirror on the underside of the blazer's sun visor and scraped some of the dried blood off her forehead with a fingernail. I was a little dizzy, but it's better now, and my arm's not as bad as it looks. Lou glanced over at her and realized that she hadn't just been hugging her arms against the cold. She was currently lifting up his coat to examine her right arm, which had a large, bloody gash below the elbow. You want to talk about it? Lou asked. At this, the tears almost came on again, but at the last moment she managed to will herself to be angry instead. Got in an argument with my dad, she spat. Your dad? Said Lou. Another few moments of silence. Again, probably none of my business, said Lou, but no dad should hit his daughter. Ever. She turned away from him, propping her elbow against the door and shifting her head so as to hide her face behind a curtain of red-orange, stick-straight hair. He didn't hit me, she said flatly. He threw me out of his car. She smoked 2 more cigarettes over the next 5 miles. She said nothing, and neither did Lou. He wanted to say something, but nothing he could think to say sounded quite right, no matter how many times he tried to draft and reorder and revise his thoughts. He had never been very good with words.
I think I'm going to make a note of that little spot right there and ask the narrator to maybe just take another crack at that line. There was a little bit of, I don't know, he kind of hesitated in that delivery, which is, again, it's no big deal, but it's one of those things that he's editing as he's working. And so I know from doing videos of my own, sometimes you have one of those little lines that you don't deliver exactly the way you want to, and you go, okay, I'm going to go back and I'll redo that one. And it's easy to overlook some of them. I've found a couple things like that in here so far, just like little stutters, like starts and stops. And that's the purpose of what I'm doing, is to help him so that we can make sure that it's perfect. Now, I'm not going through like saying, okay, you need to fix every little thing. I discussed this in yesterday's video a little bit. Like, if there's a slight little pause, if there's something that is not exactly worded the way I wrote it, it's like, there's no big deal. If it's going to take away from the reader and their experience of getting the book, then yeah, I'll have him redo it. But that's just a small little thing, but I am going to make a note of it.
2 more cigarettes over the next 5 miles. She said nothing, and neither did Lou. He wanted to say something, but nothing he could think to say sounded quite right, no matter how many times he tried to draft and reorder and revise his thoughts. He had never been very good with words, but the closer they got to their destination, the more the silence weighed on him. Finally, he had to ask. This isn't your dad's place I'm taking you to, is it? No, said the girl. It's my grandma's. Will he come looking for you there? Asked Lou. Probably not for a while. I could take you to the police or something. No, was all she said. Lou shifted in his seat. I'm Lou, by the way. I know, she said. Lou looked at her. I used to watch you play ball, she said. She furrowed her brow and made a face as if he ought to know this. You played with my brother, Mike. Mike? You mean Mike Schultz? Lou looked at the girl again, in a way seeing her for the first time. Oh my God, Angie! Her smile, the first of the drive, showed off 2 buck teeth and stretched out her freckles a bit, and some of the little girl he remembered shined through. Angie Schultz, said Lou. Of course, I'm sorry, I didn't even recognize you. Then quickly, to clarify, you've really grown up. You picked me up and didn't even know who I was? She said, incredulous at the very idea. I thought you recognized me, and that was why you stopped. Lou shrugged. I just saw someone who needed a ride. Now the full truth of the girl's destination became clear. Twin Oaks Road. Amity Court. I'm sorry, said Lou, and was not quite sure what he was apologizing for. It's okay, said Angie. Mike, never a great student but an exceptional athlete, had been the black sheep in the Schultz family. Although, come to think of it, maybe it was more like he was a white sheep in a family full of black ones. With the exception of Mike, every Schultz in Latonia City that Lou could think of had been a problem student at school, and a fair share had grown into problem citizens, and they all seemed to live at Amity Court on Twin Oaks Road. Lou did not look down on the Schultzes, or anyone else who lived at Amity Court. His father had come from poverty, and it had always been drilled into him to never look down on anyone. Nevertheless, Schultz was one of those names you were never surprised to see pop up in the Monday morning police blotter. Throwing one's daughter out of a car certainly fit the bill. Was the car moving when he threw her out? Lou wondered, but he didn't want to ask. Happy freaking Thanksgiving. Several minutes later, he turned onto Twin Oaks Road. How is Mike, anyway? Asked Lou. He's fine, said Angie. He's working at a garage out in Knox Corners. Got a big 12-point first day of archery. Nice, said Lou. He'd kill me for saying this, but ask him if he ever finally learned how to slide into third base. He'll know what it means. What? No, gross. Lou blinked. Huh? No.
Forgot about this
God,
part.
No. It's about baseball. Actual baseball. Oh, said Angie. Oh. Yeah, geez. Lou shook his head. See, we were playing Seneca Regional this one time. You might have even been there that day. And they had this real big guy who played third. He used to crowd the baseline whenever he covered the bag, and we all said if he tried that on us, we'd run him over. Just stupid talk, right? Guys being guys. Anyway, it's the first inning, and their pitcher's throwing garbage, and Mikey's on second. And I can see in the way he's hopping around, he's going to try to steal third. And he's got his eyes on that big third baseman. So, then he gets his chance, a called ball 4 in the dirt, and Mike takes off. As usual, the big guy's standing right in the baseline. Not even ready, not covering the bag, just standing in the baseline, right in Mikey's way. Well, I don't know if it was all our rough talk before the game or if Mikey just didn't like the look of the guy, but he doesn't even slow down. He lowers his shoulder and just plows right into the third baseman. Knocks the guy flat, but Mikey's going too fast. He trips and falls forward, lands right on his face, and goes rolling through the dirt. And when Mikey finally stops rolling, he stretches his arm out and smacks his hand down on the third base bag, as if he meant to do that, like the whole thing was a slide. So now there's this cloud of dust like somebody got in a fight in an old cartoon. Mikey's on the ground, the big guy from Seneca Regional's on the ground, and the whole field is silent. Our head coach is standing there in the box on the third base line, and Mikey just looks up at him with this big grin on his face, thinking Coach is about to tell him what a great job he did stealing third. And Coach says, "Schultz, you dumbass, there's a guy on first." Lou could see from Angie's polite smile that she wasn't quite getting the joke. See, it was a called ball 4, and Mikey was on second, said Lou. But he forgot that we had a guy right behind him on first, too. So the walk advanced both runners. He could have just walked to third. So he basically ran down this poor third baseman for no reason. Oh, said Angie. Oh, yeah, said Lou. We gave him all sorts of hell for that one. Every game from then on, if Mikey got on second, you could bet your life that somebody was going to yell, "Slide into third, Mikey, slide." Seneca Regional's third baseman hated him for the next 2 years, but he didn't stand on the baseline anymore. Next time I see him, I'm totally going to say that.
So the narrator that I hired for this, his name is Michael Beckett, and he's awesome. His delivery on some of this is just so good. But I know that he has done like some acting. I know he's in some theater productions and stuff. And I'm just really happy with the way he's delivered some of these lines. Now, I don't know if you're following along with the text, you might notice, okay, there's a few little places where there's maybe a word or two that he's off with, like he misses one word or he chooses one he chooses a slightly different word or something. I take that as that's his interpretation of what the line should be. And unless it's going to change the meaning or my intended meaning and alter the experience that the reader gets, I'm not going to have him go back and change it. I'm not going to be micromanaging to that extent on this. I'm really happy with how that all sounded. And have you noticed? I don't know how much you personally listen to audiobooks, but I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and one of the big challenges that I have sometimes is when whether it's a male narrator who's doing female voices, or sometimes even worse, a female narrator who's doing male voices. I appreciate when they make the effort to change their inflection and stuff, but there are times when it becomes a major distraction, and it really can take me out of the moment when there's this guy trying to talk in a very light and airy voice, or like I said, sometimes even more distracting is when a female narrator is using her voice actor skills to talk in a really deep husky voice, and I appreciate the acting that goes into it, but there are times when it's so distracting that I have a hard time focusing on the story. I feel like he's getting the right balance here, where he is speaking with the inflection, like he's acting out the lines, but I'm not finding it so distracting when he's using female voices. At least I'm not. I hope that nobody else is, but all right. Anyway.
Said Angie. Do it, laughed Lou, and tell him McCulloch says hi. I will, she said. He still talks about you sometimes. He said you still play ball. Yeah, at Pitt. How about Mikey? Angie said nothing for a second. The way she turned away and shook her head told Lou that had been the wrong question to ask. No, was all she said. Finally, Lou turned off of Twin Oaks and onto the dirt road that marked the entry of Amity Court. The rain had stopped, and before him, laid out in rows, was a grid system of mobile homes, each with its own driveway and little front yard. In the double lights of the Blazers' headlamps, children's toys and pipe-framed swing sets cast shifting shadows on faux siding, cinder blocks, and empty brown bottles. Not every trailer court was rough, but in Seneca County, Amity Court was about as rough as it got. The third one on the right over there, said Angie, pointing. That pink one? Said Lou. Yeah. Angie's buck teeth were no longer showing, and Lou noticed that she was rubbing her arms again beneath his coat. You sure about this? Lou asked. I'm sure, said Angie. Lou kept driving, but much slower than necessary, because he was not so sure. But he couldn't rightly refuse either. He swung wide to avoid an overturned charcoal grill whose briquettes had been scattered across the lane. He almost kept driving past the pink trailer. Almost. But in the end, he slowed and put the vehicle in park. If she wasn't going to a hospital or a police station willingly, what else could he do? He turned and looked very seriously at the straight-haired girl with the freckles, the girl he knew better as a tiny child in pigtails who was always in the stands for their home games, on her father's lap. Angie, I will only let you out of this vehicle, said Lou, if you promise me that this is a safe place for you to be tonight. Angie nodded. It's safe. I could take you to stay with your brother, said Lou, or to my mom and dad's place, or the YMCA, or... It's safe, she said again.
Okay, there's an example of something we need to change. So the line is, or to my mom and dad's place, or to the YWCA, and he said YMCA. So I'm going to mark down, that's at the 10:20 mark in the file for chapter 16, YWCA. So we'll have to ask him to go back and make that little revision.
I promise. My grandma's the only one home. And maybe her boyfriend, but he's nice to me. Lou hesitated. Then he reached into the back seat. He pushed aside the green duffel bag to get at his backpack, dug out a notebook and a pen, and jotted down 2 phone numbers. The first number is my parents' house, he said. I'll be there until Sunday night. The second number can reach me at school if you ever need to call me there for any reason. It was the number for the payphone in the hallway of his dorm at Pitt, which meant that at least in theory she could reach him there. But that would depend on whether A, someone bothered to pick up the ringing phone, B, the person who answered had any clue who Lou was, and C, they cared enough to go looking for him to tell him he had a call.
So, a little bit of backstory there. To research, I put that in quotes, to research this little part of the story, I had to call up my mom and dad and ask them, what was it like to be in college and just have, no phone in your dorm room or anything? You just had, how would somebody get in contact with you? Would they call the nearest payphone? Would they call the dorm itself? And I think that's basically exactly, it's very close to word for word what my mom told me, was that, yes, you could call the payphone, but whether or not they got through to you was whether someone bothered to pick up the ringing phone, if they answered, if the person who answered had any clue who you were, and if they cared enough to go looking for you. So, interesting the way things have changed.
Lou tore the sheet of college-ruled paper loose and handed it to Angie.
To be fair, when I was a freshman in college, I was using calling cards on a landline that was in the dorm. So that even seems like a big stretch from today. But anyway, sorry.
Even if all you need is a ride somewhere, said Lou, or somewhere safe to be, call me. Angie stared at the piece of paper. And Angie, said Lou, if your old man ever lays a hand on you again. Just thinking about it made Lou's fingers close tightly on the wheel of the Blazer, causing his forearms to bulge. You find me and tell me, he said, and whatever he does to you, I will do to him twice over. Angie's good eye went wide. Oh, and tell Mikey to get a hold of me sometime, he added. He can come down to Pitt for a weekend, and we'll catch up. Or maybe he could come and see me play ball sometime. I'm in his old position, second base. Angie hesitated. She looked down at the paper again. What if I call the house and your dad answers? Lou sighed. Don't believe everything you hear about my dad. He's a good guy, really. Okay, said Angie, removing his coat from her lap. Thank you, Lou. Lou nodded, and with that, Angie climbed out of the passenger side. Lou waited until she'd made it indoors, hoping he hadn't made a terrible mistake by bringing her here. A few seconds later, as he pulled out onto the dirt drive, the Blazer's headlamps shifted, shining their full glow on a small sign on wire posts in the front yard of the pink trailer. It read, Save Our Hospitals. Lou frowned at it. Then he hit the gas.
So that's chapter 16. Now we're on to chapter 17. My computer's beeping at me, but we're okay. So one of the things about Lou is that up until this point in the story, you have only ever seen him as the 50-year-old father of the main character, or 55 or something like that. And he kind of comes off as a little bit of a jerk. And he's very quiet and not very interested in communicating with his son. And in the scenes that we're about to see of 19-year-old Lou, he also is a little bit of a jerk through these scenes too. And so to me, when I wanted to make it clear, he's not a jerk. It's the stuff that's going on that is making him this way, and it's the way he communicates. And so that's part of the reason that I began his story with him picking up this hitchhiker and the interaction between him and Angie. And obviously that plays a significant role in some of the things that come up later. But the main reason that little story is there is to introduce Lou and show his motivations, and to show that he's not a jerk the way he's going to act later. It seems like it, but that's kind of to get some of his essential qualities across. So I am out of coffee. I'm going to take a quick break, and I'm going to come right back, and we're going to do chapter 17. Okay, back at it. All right, I'll be honest with you. That break was just as much to test my be right back screen as it was to get some coffee. But we are refueled and ready to listen some more. I do have the ability to play a little bit of music there. If I do go to a waiting screen like that, I should really make sure that we got the music playing. And again, I don't know why my camera keeps disconnecting whenever I'm switching scenes here, but it's a fairly easy fix. All right, chapter 17. This is still from Lou's perspective. Here we go.
Chapter 17. There had always been something strange about that X on the wall. Lou wasn't sure what it was that bothered him about it exactly. Maybe just the fact that it was so off-centered, his father, ever a practical and meticulous man, had drawn it on the wall when Lou was a small boy as a target for him to practice throwing his baseball and catching it when it bounced back, in the winter months when it was too cold to go outside. But for some reason, Nat had drawn it in an odd spot on the wall. It was pretty high, really, to serve as a good throwing target, and placing it in an off-center spot was nothing like Nathaniel G. McCulloch, who contended there was a right way to do everything, and tended to strive for it on every occasion. Even in something as inconsequential as drawing an X on the wall, Lou would have expected Nat to have placed it dead center and at the optimal height. Lou hauled back and gave the ball a throw. Not a baseball. Heck, a baseball would have knocked this crummy old house down. Instead, he used a blue rubber racquetball, which had been his standard weapon of choice for basement-bound fielding practice since the age of 12. It was better practice than one might have thought. Racquetballs were a bit small, but they had a hell of a bounce and took funny hops that kept you on your toes. When it came off the wall along the seam of one of the bricks, it could produce an unexpected backspin. Good training for hand-eye coordination and reaction time. As the ball took a hop and came back into Lou's open glove, he paused to look around the nasty dirt floor basement. He would never understand why his father had stayed in this old house all these years. He'd had major renovations done, but Lord knew Nathaniel McCulloch had enough money to afford a better place than this. Sure, the man had grown up here, but at some point a guy had to cut his own cord and move on. Lou was about to toss the ball again when a high-pitched wail came reverberating through the floorboards above his head. "God help me," Lou muttered under his breath. "Miles frickin' Davis? At it again?" He rolled into the driveway in his blazer late the previous night, and he had, thus far, managed to avoid the sound of Nat blowing his horn, but his luck only lasted so long. "Hope Angie's all right," thought Lou. "I should have insisted on taking her to the hospital to get checked out. Who knows if she was telling the whole story?" He made a mental note to keep an eye on the police blotter anytime he was in town in the future, and to pray that he never saw the name Angie Schultz in it. He tossed the ball a few more times before the sound of his father's trumpet became too much for him. Finally, he shoved the racquetball into his glove, pulled the glove off his hand, and tossed it into the corner of the basement. The trumpet, no, cornet, his father always insisted on calling it, only got louder as Lou climbed the stairs. He emerged on the first floor of the house, ignored his father in the adjoining room with his horn raised to his lips, and walked down the hall to his bedroom. Lou shut the door behind him and within seconds had his record player rotating. He cranked the knob until Eddie Van Halen's guitar was drowning out Nat McCulloch's cornet. If there was one thing Lou had not missed since leaving for college last year, it was listening to his father play the same old songs every night, badly. At least this time he would only have to put up with it for a couple of days until Thanksgiving break was over. "I've got to find some other place to stay after next semester," thought Lou, throwing himself down onto his bed. "I cannot take another whole summer of this. I just can't. Got to get out of here." Lou's grandfather had built this house, and his father had lived in it for almost his entire life. He could have bought something bigger, in a nicer neighborhood, but he'd instead chosen to have the old place restored, renovated, and added on to. So the little house that had been practically a shack during Nat's boyhood was transformed into a beautiful middle-class home with respectable square footage and an enviable view of the river across the railroad tracks, though no trains ran on them anymore. Nat often spoke of one day handing the family home down to Lou. "Me? Live in this house?" thought Lou. "Over my dead body."
So it's probably important to note that by this point in the story, because we have gotten some of the story from Lou's son Owen, who is the main character, and we have seen some of Owen's interactions with Lou, it's important to note that Lou and his wife do live in that same house at that point in the story in modern day.
Lou wasn't surprised when he heard the quiet knock from his door, barely audible over the wail of Eddie's guitar. "Come in," Lou called without turning down the volume or moving from his bed. The door opened a few inches and his mother ducked her head in. Her blonde hair was done up high and tightly curled. An unlit cigarette was pinched between fingers with long, bright red nails. Rose Stewart McCulloch said something that Lou didn't hear, then waited for a response. She did not raise her voice or strain herself in order to be heard over the sound of the record. On principle, she never raised her voice, which forced Lou to get up off his bed and turn the music down. "What?" he said. "I said, is everything okay in here?" she said, same volume as before. "Yeah, why?" said Lou. "Well," said Rose, "just because you've been gone for a while doesn't mean I've forgotten what you're like when you're upset." Her lipstick matched the red of her fingernails, as did her heels. Lou had barely ever seen her without makeup on, and he did not think he had ever seen her wear anything other than a dress outside of the house. She leaned against the door frame and crossed her arms, nodding toward Lou's Panasonic turntable. "When you turn the volume on that thing so high that even you don't enjoy the sound of it anymore, it means something's up." Lou blinked. This behavior was news to him, but thinking about it, she was right. "I like the hairdo, by the way," she added, grinning. "I bet Dad doesn't," said Lou. "No, he does not," said Rose. "So, what's wrong?" "I don't know," said Lou. Rose gave him a moment to think. He needed that sometimes, to collect his thoughts. "Yeah," he concluded. "I don't know." "Is it maybe a little strange to come home again?" she asked. "After being independent and on your own for a while?" A particularly high note from Nat McCulloch's cornet came through loud and clear from down the hall, and Lou felt his jaw clench involuntarily. How could a person practice all his life at something and still be so bad at it? "It is a little strange," he agreed. "Well, I understand that, but you also have to remember," said Rose in the sing-song sort of cadence she always used when making a very good point, "neither of us got the opportunity to go to college." Rose waited. From experience, Lou knew that she would not continue until he acknowledged what she had said. It was a sort of conversational tic she had. She was a sixth-grade teacher by trade, and there were times when her techniques for dealing with rowdy students permeated into her parenting style, never mind that her son was almost 20 years old. "I know," said Lou. "And this arrangement is just as new to us as it is to you," she continued. She waited again. "I understand," Lou said, nodding. "So if we're not acting the way you think we're supposed to be acting, just know that we can't read your mind, but we are trying. It's a challenge to reconcile the fact that you are an independent person now, but also still our child, and still living under our roof, and subject to our rules. We will do our best to respect your independence, if you will also do your best to respect us." The rules in question were the ones that had to do with the 2 six-packs Lou had brought home in the back seat of his Blazer. He'd stashed them in his baseball bag before bringing his things into the house, but he had expected to make it longer than a day before getting caught with them. Leave it to his teetotaling father to bring the hammer down over a couple of beers. There were times when Lou thought the apple could not have fallen farther from the tree. The kind of words people used to describe Nat McCulloch were gentle, kind, and upright. but Lou McCulloch was competitive and not very gentle. Nat was kind to everyone he met, but Lou could be mean, and he knew it, especially if someone didn't deserve kindness. Woe to them. And upright? Well, as a kid, Lou had been known to sneak cigarettes and curse rather creatively when adults weren't listening. He was upright in the ways that mattered to him, but outside of that, there was fun to be had. From what Lou could tell, he was more like his grandfather Grant than his dad. Lou had been told that Grant McCulloch had once fist-fought a union boss on the factory floor of the Germania Oil Well Supply Company over a labor dispute. Meanwhile, the only thing even remotely scandalous that Lou had ever heard of his father doing came from a story told by one of Nat's childhood friends, Art Hart, owner of the local music store, in which Art claimed that he and Nat had once snuck into the Derrick Theater without tickets. But
Michael is doing such a good job, because I look at some of this stuff that I wrote and like, that is a ridiculously long sentence. It doesn't seem like a long sentence when you just read it in a book, but to read that out loud as a voice actor and to have to narrate that and figure out the right cadence, and I didn't make this easy on him. So if I'm reviewing this and it ever seems like I'm nitpicking anything that he's doing in like my revisions that I want him to make, I really didn't make his job easy. I really appreciate all the work he did. He did a really great job.
Art Hart was well known as a peddler of tall tales, and it sure didn't sound like something Lou's father would do. I do respect your rules, Lou told Rose. I wasn't going to drink in the house. There's supposed to be a party in town tomorrow night, so I was going to take them there. We don't want you drinking there either, said Rose. Imagine how it would look if you were picked up. Imagine how it would look, thought Lou. Not imagine what would happen, not imagine how it would affect you. No, imagine how it would look. Dad has always said, no drinking in this house, said Lou. I wasn't going to drink in this house. I was going to take it somewhere else. I was following his rules. Rose slipped the unlit cigarette behind her ear. Lou had left his own smokes in the blazer. He wasn't even going to try to anticipate his father's rules regarding cigarettes in the house. For as long as he could remember, his father had smoked a pipe in the den every evening after dinner. But his mother, who smoked cigarettes, only ever smoked them outside. Lou wasn't sure if this was an unspoken rule, an official policy, or something in between. But he had a feeling that if he broached the subject, it would only lead to further disagreements, so he decided to let it be for now. It wasn't worth the effort. Only now did Rose step all the way into Lou's bedroom. She glanced back over her shoulder, then shut the door behind her. It's not so much the drinking itself, she said, lowering her voice a bit. It's more, well, honestly, it's really just about listening to your father right now. Rose McCulloch sat down on the bed beside Lou, which was something she hadn't done in a long time. You haven't been home in a while, she said, so you wouldn't know, but things have gotten much worse. What has? Said Lou. You mean the hospital thing? Yes, that. Rose pulled the cigarette back out from behind her ear and rolled it nervously between her fingers. It's not just the talk radio call-ins or the town hall meetings anymore. There have been letters and phone calls. Lou leaned over to switch off the record player. It was Van Halen's newest album, released just a few months prior, and this was one of Lou's least favorite tracks on it anyway. A strange cover of an old-timey song from the 1920s. Well, what do you mean? Said Lou. Like, threats? Rose sucked her teeth. Mostly just minor, harassing sorts of comments, but yes, there have also been some threats. Mom, said Lou, sitting up very straight. If anyone has threatened you, I will... No, you most certainly will not. Bite your tongue right now, and don't you say another word. Lord, that's all we need. You getting into a fight or mixed up in some sort of trouble. This whole hospital situation has gotten out of control. The doctors in this town have the people so riled up. Lou's mother trailed off, and Lou realized why. His father's trumpet playing from the opposite side of the house had stopped. "I'm not asking you to be enthused about being home," Rose whispered. "I'm not even asking you to be nice. All I ask is that you don't put your father under any more stress than he already is. Please. His doctor said—" "Honey," came Nat's voice from the hall outside. "I'm in here talking to Louis, dear," Rose called. "I'll be right out." Lou's mother gave his knee a little squeeze. "Can you do that, Louis?" she whispered. "Just for a few days." Louis. No one had called him that in months. But Lou nodded. Rose winked at him, then she left the room. Lou remained seated on the bed. Don't put your father under any stress. Well, he would try, but his success would all depend on whether he managed to intercept a certain letter from the university in time. If it hasn't gotten here already, that is. In the hallway outside, Lou's father spoke softly. No doubt he thought he was speaking quietly enough so as not to be heard through the door. But his hearing wasn't so good these days, and he spoke.
This is something I'm going to make a note of for myself. Right here, I'm noticing that there is an apostrophe there. That in the biz, we talk about smart quotes and dumb quotes. So smart quotes look like this, and they curve toward the adjoining word. Same with apostrophes. You can see this one in wasn't. It curves toward the correct letter. I'm noticing that we've got one here that is a dumb apostrophe. It's just a straight line. Usually those will auto format on their own. But every once in a while, when you do something like copy and paste some text or you move something around, sometimes the word processor, when it's plugging in these different symbols, it'll default to the unformatted version, and that's what happened here. Something like that. Most people are never gonna even notice, but since I noticed it, I'm gonna mark down what page it's on. 145. I'm gonna make a note of it so that I can go back and I can fix that. And the next time I upload an updated version of this chapter, we'll have that fixed.
Louder than he knew. "Is he going to straighten up?" asked Nat. Lou bristled. "We talked it over and everything is fine," Rose replied. "Good," said Nat. "So what do you think? A little rusty, but do I still got it?" "Still got it," said Rose. "You sound just like Gid the Great."
All right, so that's chapters 16 and 17 down. I think that's where I'm going to wrap it up for this little work session. Here, I'm going to switch to this close-up view. And again, I have to refresh the camera to get it to work. I don't know why it keeps doing that, but oh well. It's fine. So yeah, there we go. You get to see a little bit of what it's like to be an independent author here too, a self-published author. So I get to go through, I say get to, for a lot of people, this is the sort of work that they would not want to do, to have to go through and proof every single audio file and look at every single word. But as a self-published author, this is one of the trade-offs I have. I've got 100% creative control over all of my work, and I'm hiring people to do this stuff myself. I am doing a lot of the work on my own, and hey, this little apostrophe right here is a good example of one of the trade-offs. So if I didn't have the ability to access all the files and change everything that I want to at any point, then that might stay that way for the conceivable future. You know, like it would just have to remain there until the publisher decided at a later printing, like maybe they would change it. But if they never did another print run, you know, they're not going to go back through and change all of their print files just for one little thing. But for me, because I am self-published, I could change that right now, in the next 5 minutes, upload the file, and within, I mean, Amazon says that it takes up to 24 hours to update this stuff, but usually it's more like 6 to 12. That could be updated on there like right away. And it doesn't change the copies that are already out in the world, but any copy from that point on that gets printed, or any ebook copies, they're fixed right away. And I could do that with a line that I don't like. If I saw something in there and I'm like, I didn't word that very well. It's not like that forever. I can change it and I can go back. So, you know, like I said, there's trade-offs. I don't get the benefits as a self-published author of, you know, a big marketing team or a big publishing house, you know, and their resources. But I do have that creative control, which to me is really important. So you get to see a little bit of that in action. And you get to see some of the extra work I have to do as a result. But I'm willing to do it. So thanks for sitting in with me on this writing session. And yeah, if I continue to get some interest in these videos where I do a little bit of my work and share it with you, then I'll keep putting them out there. So yeah, thanks. And if you, oh, one more thing. I keep forgetting to push this. I do have Patreon, so if you would like to support an independent artist, a self-published writer, and if you like what I do, I hope that you'll consider supporting me for a couple bucks a month on Patreon, or please check out one of my books. I really appreciate it. Thanks. See you next time.